Iska Vey.
Captain.
You have been keeping a dragon. At the hill shrine. The creature is gone. Where is it?
I do not know.
You know.
I do not know.
You will tell me where it is.
I will not.
You understand what this is?
I understand what this is.
You understand what it has always been.
I understand what it has always been.
Bring her to the stones.
She found the mother dragon by the way the snow had gone wrong. But Iska Vey knew the shape of every drift on the North Ridge. She had walked it since she was a girl, when her mother used to send her up the goat path to bring back firewood and keep her out of the village's mouth. The drifts curled the same way every winter. The wind cut them the same. But this morning the snow was wrong. It had been melted in a wide black scar near the base of the ravine, and what was left of it was tinted pink under the new fall, the pink that did not belong in snow, but belonged in linens taken too quickly off a body. She stopped at the edge of the drop. Her breath made a sharp shape in front of her face and held there too long, because she had stopped breathing. The mother dragon was sprawled across the floor of the ravine, half buried, half revealed. One wing had folded over a boulder like a sail thrown onto a wreck. The other was gone, torn at the shoulder, dragged some distance, abandoned in a stand of stripped pines that were also charred at the tips. The neck was a long, dark line in the snow. The eyes were already iced over. The body was the color of an old hearth that had cooled, the kind of dark red that looked black until you got close to it. Smoke still ghosted from the throat in small, dry puffs, like something dying still trying to speak. Iska did not cry out. She did not run. She stood at the lip of the ravine and counted the things she could see. The broken haft of a crown lance, the deep ridge marks in the snow where a man had been dragged before he was killed, the scattering of hot stones along the dragon's belly, where her dying body had melted everything beneath her. And when she was finished counting, she let the air out of her chest and went down into the ravine. She was not foolish. She had a knife at her hip and a piece of jerked goat in her satchel, and a long memory of what the crown did to people who came near a dragon's body. The bounty law had not changed since her childhood. Anyone caught with dragon scale, dragon blood, dragon bone, dragon claw, anyone who touched the body before the king's men returned to claim it, would be hanged on the stone circle outside Tannevik before the next dawn. She knew this. Her mother had been killed for less. She went down anyway, because the body was not all she had seen. There, among the rocks where the mother's tail had thrashed, a darker shape, a small one. A long oval the color of riverstone, with a long crack down its middle. Iska reached it before her mind had finished deciding to. She brushed the snow off it with her gloved hand. It was warm. Even through the leather, she could feel that it was warm in a way no stone should be. Inside the crack, something was breathing. 2 slow, shallow breaths. Then nothing for so long, she thought she had imagined it. Then one more. She knelt and put her hand flat against the shell. It was warmer than her palm. It was almost the temperature of a child's forehead in a fever. The crack ran from one end to the other, and a faint orange light flickered inside it like a coal a wind kept trying to kill. She heard her mother's voice then. Not a memory exactly, but the way the dead come back when you are about to do something they would understand. "They will burn you, Iska. They will burn you for this." She put her arms around the egg, lifted it against her chest, and did not let it go. The walk back took 2 hours longer than it should have. She did not go through the village. She climbed the long way around, past the empty sheep pens that nobody used since the late frost 3 winters ago had killed the flocks, and up the goat path that led to the old hill shrine on the rise above Tannevik. The shrine had been built for a god the village no longer prayed to. Nobody went there anymore but Iska, because the village priest paid her 2 coppers a month to sweep the steps and keep birds out of the rafters, and because she had nowhere else to be that wasn't her shack near the edge of the woods, where the village boys threw rocks at her door when they had been drinking. You put the egg behind the altar. She built up the small iron brazier that the priest had left for the offerings nobody made anymore. She took the dry kindling she had brought up the week before and laid it carefully, the way old Sten the blacksmith had taught her when she was 9, and her mother had still been alive to need a daughter who could keep a fire going. She struck flint. The flame caught. She fed it slowly until the brazier was hot enough that she could hold her hand a finger's width from the iron and feel the heat curl her skin. She moved the egg next to it. For a long time, nothing happened. She sat with her back against the cold stone of the altar and watched the orange light inside the crack, and she watched it flicker the same way the crack itself seemed to widen, slowly. The way a thing wakes up when it has decided it might still be alive. Then the shell broke. It did not break the way an egg breaks. It broke the way a door opens when someone has been pushing on it for too long. The top half came away in a single piece and rolled into the brazier, where it began to smolder. And out of the bottom half came a wet, dark, shivering body the length of her forearm, with claws no bigger than a kitten's, and a head that was almost too heavy for its neck. The hatchling was the color of wet slate, and it could not open its eyes. It tried to cry out. What came out was a sound like a kettle just beginning to whistle, very thin, very high, and at the end of it, a single small puff of orange light passed between its teeth and dissolved in the cold air. Iska began to weep. She had not wept in 3 years. She had not wept since the morning she had found Sten's coat folded on the floor of her mother's empty cell, the coat he had hung there during the night before her mother was led out to the stone circle, the coat he had never come back to take. She had stopped weeping then because there had not been anyone to weep in front of. There was not anyone now either. But she wept all the same, and the hatchling pressed its face into the leather of her glove and did not stop shivering. And after a long time, Iska understood that it was searching for warmth and that nothing in the room was warm enough. She opened her coat. She took the hatchling and tucked it against the bare skin of her chest where the locket her mother had given her still hung on its braided cord. The hatchling went still. Its breath was small and dry and hot against her collarbone. Its tail wrapped once around her ribs. She kept it there for the rest of that day. Below the shrine, the village was making the sounds it always made at dusk in deep winter. Smoke drifting from the chimneys, the clatter of a dropped pot in the tavern courtyard, someone shouting at a dog. Iska listened to all of it the way she had listened to it her whole life, like a sound made by people who lived inside a wall, while she lived in the air just outside that wall. The wall was not a thing she had built. The wall had been built around her by hands that had also lit the kindling under her mother. When the hatchling moved against her, she looked down. It had opened its eyes. They were the color of melted brass, and they were looking at her with the absolute fixed attention of something that had decided she was the only thing left in the world that had not killed it yet.
Iska did not know what dragonkin understood and what they did not. She had heard the stories the old men told in the tavern when they thought she could not hear them through the wall of her shack. They said dragons remembered everything. They said dragons knew the face of a person from the moment that person fed them. And they carried that face for as long as they lived, which was longer than any man's life. The old men said this in the voice they used for warnings. Iska had always heard the warnings in a different way than they meant them. She put her thumb gently against the ridge above the hatchling's eye. "You have a name now," she said. The shrine was empty. Her voice did not echo. "I am calling you Vor." It was an old word. Her mother had used it. It meant the one who watches. Not the watcher who kept guard over a gate, but the watcher who kept faith with a person across a distance that should have separated them. There had been a story about a hawk that had carried a feather to a dying queen on the other side of a winter sea. The hawk had been called Vor. Iska did not know if the story was true. She thought possibly her mother had made it up. It did not matter. "I am Iska," she said. "Iska Vey. The thing they did to my mother they will do to me if they find you. So you will be quiet and you will be small and you will not let anyone know you are here. Do you understand?" The hatchling tightened its tail around her ribs. Iska took a long breath. She wiped her face with the back of her glove. She picked up the still smouldering top of the eggshell from the brazier and carried it outside into the snow and crushed it under her heel into smaller pieces, and then crushed those pieces into smaller ones, and then took the whole crushed handful and walked it down the goat earth path and threw it into the moving water of the stream that ran past the foot of the hill. The pieces went black under the ice. They were gone. When she came back up to the shrine, the hatchling was asleep against the iron brazier in the curl of her cloak, and the village below was lighting its lanterns one by one along the wall. And Iska Vey understood. With a clarity that came on so cold and so simple she almost laughed at it, that she had just made the same choice her mother had made, that she would die for it, the same way her mother had died for it, and that she did not care. She knelt next to the brazier and put her hand on Vor's small slate-colored back and watched the snow fall outside the shrine door and thought about how long she had until they came for her. She thought she had perhaps a year. Spring did not come to Tannevik that year. The snow held into the month of May, when it should have been receding to the higher slopes. The river stayed frozen past Solveig's Eve. The chimney smoke from the village rose straight up into a sky that did not change colour from dawn to dusk. The old men in the tavern said it was the worst winter of their lives, and the old men said this every year. But this year they said it more quietly, and they said it while looking out the window toward the north ridge. The Crown's dragon hunters had taken 5 days to come back for the body. By the time they arrived, the carcass had been worked over by wolves and crows, and the most valuable parts, the long bones of the wing, the heartstone, the second row of teeth behind the first, had been taken by something with hands. The men who arrived were not happy. They were 3 in number, led by a captain in a black wool cloak with the crown's mark stitched in red at the throat, and they came through the village asking questions that nobody wanted to answer. The captain's name was Bren Holst. He stayed. The other 2 left after a week, taking what they could salvage from the ravine and a written account of the kill they had performed 3 weeks before. Holst remained in the village. He took the inn's largest room. He paid for it with crown silver, which the innkeeper had not seen in 7 years, and which made the innkeeper's wife smile for the first time in the same span. Holst was a thin man with a clean face who did not drink and did not speak more than he needed to. He spent his days walking the ridges and his evenings at the same corner table in the tavern, watching the door. Iska watched him from a long way off. She had come down into the village 3 times since the night she had carried Vor up to the shrine. Once for salt, once for thread, once because she could not bear another day without seeing another human face that was not her own in some small bronze mirror on the shrine wall. Each time she had walked past the tavern with her head down and her hands inside her sleeves, and Vor had stayed in the shrine, half grown now, the length of a hunting hound and twice the weight, sleeping in the warm pile of stones she had built him beside the brazier. He grew faster than she had expected, faster than any of the old men's stories had said dragons grew. By the first thaw, he was as big as a winter calf. By mare, he could not curl up entirely inside her cloak. He had stopped trying. He sat at the foot of the altar, with his tail folded around his hind feet, and watched her come in through the door. And the look in his brass eyes was the same look that had been there on the first day, only larger. He did not breathe fire yet. He could not. The puffs of orange light that came out of him when he yawned were warm but not dangerous, and Iska had read enough of the priest's old books to know that dragonfire came later, with the first molt, and that the first molt did not come until the second winter. She had time. She thought she had time. She did not have time. In the tavern on a night when the wind was tearing at the shutters and the fire in the great hearth had burned down to red, Bren Holst put aside the ledger he had been reading and looked across the table at the man who had just sat down opposite him. "You're the smith," Holst said. "I am. Old Sten, they call you." "They do," Holst nodded once. He was a man who had been trained never to begin with the question he wanted answered. "I have been here 41 days, he said. "In that time, no one in this village has told me anything I did not already know. I do not think this is because no one knows anything. I think this is because they do not like me." "They do not like you," Sten agreed. "I am the crown's captain. They do not have to like me. They do not have to talk to you either." Holst was quiet for a moment. He turned the silver crown ring on his small finger. He had been turning it the same way for 41 days, and Sten had been watching him do it, and Sten knew the trick of it. Knew that when the ring turned slowly, the captain was thinking, and when it turned quickly, the captain had made a decision he had not yet said aloud. The ring was turning slowly. "I had a sister," Holst said. "When I was 9, we lived in a village called Adale. A worm came down out of the eastern peaks in the dry summer, and it set the village on fire from the air. And my sister did not get out of the smithy because the door was barred from the inside. The smith was my father. He thought he was protecting her by barring the door. He had not understood yet that the fire was coming through the roof." Sten said nothing. "I have killed 11 dragons since," Holst said. "I will kill 12 before I sleep at night. I do not care about the bounty. I have not cared about the bounty since I was 13 years old. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that I am not a cruel man. I am a careful man, and I do not believe a dragon's egg is left behind in the snow without someone noticing. You do not. I do not." Sten took a long pull from the mug in front of him. The mug was empty. He had drunk it down half an hour ago. He had been pretending to drink from it ever since. "You'll forgive me, Captain," he said. "I am an old man. I do not see what I used to see. I do not hear what I used to hear. I sleep early and I rise late, and what happens between those hours is not my concern." "Of course." Holst nodded again. The ring turned. He smiled, not unpleasantly. "I would not ask you to spy on your neighbours, Smith. I know you would not. I would only ask you to remember, when the time comes, which neighbours you are protecting and from what." Sten finished his empty mug. He got up, he went out into the snow. In the dark of the road, he stopped at the corner, where the path to the hill shrine branched off from the village square, and he stood there for a long time, and he did not go up. Iska had been teaching Vor to fetch. It had not been her idea. She had read in one of the priest's books, a great rotted spine volume of old Hessmark worm lore that nobody had opened in 100 years, that dragonkin who had been raised among men sometimes mimicked the behaviours of the hounds those men kept. She had not believed this. Then she had thrown a small bone across the shrine floor one afternoon, partly out of boredom, and Vor had launched himself off the altar with such enthusiasm that he had knocked over the brazier and set fire to the rug. And after she had stamped the fire out and pulled the bone away from him and relit the brazier and stopped laughing, she had been laughing. She could not remember the last time she had laughed. She had thrown the bone again. He brought it back. He brought it back the way a happy dog brings a stick back, which is to say with his whole body. He was the length of a hunting hound now, and he came across the shrine floor with the bone in his teeth, and his tail dragging a long, shallow furrow in the dust. And when he reached her, he laid the bone on the toe of her boot with such solemnity that she had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing again. He sat. He waited. He looked at her with the brass eyes that she had come to understand contained an entire language nobody had ever taught her to read. Again, she said. She threw the bone. He went after it. Halfway across the shrine floor, his wings, which had been folded against his back for as long as she had known him, small, useless, leathery things that had not yet caught up to the rest of him, opened by accident. He gave a small, surprised sound. He pushed against the air. He lifted. He flew. It was 4 feet off the ground, and it lasted not quite 3 seconds. And he crashed into the side of the brazier and knocked a stack of dried sage off the altar. And Iska realized she was on her feet with both hands pressed against her mouth and tears coming down her face for the second time in her life, inside the walls of that shrine. Vor lay sprawled on the stone floor among the broken sage. He looked up at her. He blinked. The brass eyes were enormous. He had flown. She had not known he could fly yet. She had not known he was that close. The old book said the first flight came with the first molt, and the first molt came in the second winter. But Vor was only 6 months old, and he had not molted, and he had flown. He was growing faster than the books said he should. The books had been wrong about other things too. They had said dragon hatchling could not be tamed. They had said dragon hatchlings did not bond to men. They had said many things Iska now knew were not true, because she had been told them by people who had never sat with a hatchling against their chest while it slept and listened to it breathe the way a held child breathes. But the books had also said one thing Iska now understood was almost certainly true. They had said, a dragon raised by a single hand will know that hand to the end of its life, and will know also the hands that have wronged the hand it loves. She knelt beside Vor on the floor. She put her hand on his slate-grey shoulder. He made the kettle sound that he made when he was pleased. She did not know how she knew he was pleased. She knew. You are getting big, she said. He blinked at her. You cannot be here much longer. He blinked again. He did not understand the words, she thought, but he understood the weight of them, the way a child understands the weight of a sentence said, in a tone the child has never heard before. He pressed his head into the palm of her hand. His scales were warm. She did not move for a long time. Below the hill in the village, Bren Holst was walking the road that ran along the foot of the rise. He had walked this road every dusk for 43 days. Tonight, as he passed beneath the long shadow of the goat path, he stopped. He looked down at his boot. He bent and lifted from the snow a thin, dark thing the size of his thumbnail. It was a single scale. It was the colour of slate. He turned it in his fingers in the failing light. Then he closed his hand around it. Then he kept walking, slowly toward the inn, and he did not look up at the hill. He did not need to look up at the hill. He had already decided what he would do in the morning. She knew before he came up the hill. She knew because Vor knew. The dragon, who had been asleep against the warm stones of the brazier when the morning bell rang twice in the village below. A sound that did not belong to a morning. A sound that meant the crown's men had called the council to the square. The dragon rose, slowly, with the hackles of small new spines lifting along his neck, and he made a sound Iska had never heard him make. It was a low, rolling thing in the back of his throat that vibrated in the floor of the shrine and made the dust on the altar move. "Vor," she said. He did not look at her. He was looking at the door. Iska had prepared for this morning from the moment the captain had arrived in Tannevik. She had a small leather pack already filled with dried meat and flint, and a length of waxed cord. She had a fur-lined hood she had stolen, piece by piece, from the rag bin behind the tavern. She had a map drawn in her own hand on the back of a piece of vellum, scraped clean from one of the priest's old books, showing the goat paths that ran along the spine of the Skarn range to the wild peaks of the north, where the book said no man went and no crown rider had ever returned from. She had not been able to prepare Vor. He was 9 months old. He could fly perhaps a length of 10 paces before he had to come down again. He could breathe a thin trail of fire the length of a man's forearm. He could not yet hunt for himself. He could not yet survive in the high peaks without a hand to feed him through the worst weeks. She had known this for 2 months. She had been trying not to know it. She had been telling herself there would be more time, more time, more time. The way her mother had told her there would be more time. There would not be more time. She crossed the shrine floor and knelt in front of him. She took his head in both her hands. He was so much bigger than her hands now. She had to spread her fingers wide to hold him. "Listen to me," she said. The brass eyes met hers. "You are going to fly," she said. "You are going to fly out of the back window. There is a ledge below the window. From the ledge you can see the goat path that runs to the north. You are going to follow that path. You are going to keep flying north until your wings will not hold you. Then you will walk. You will walk north. Do not come back to the village. Do not come back for me. Do you understand?" He made the kettle sound. It was not the pleased sound. It was a sound she did not know. "I cannot come with you," she said. Her voice did not break. She had thought it would. She had practiced this speech in the dark on many nights, the way a woman practices the speech she will give before a magistrate she has not yet met, and she had thought she would not be able to deliver it. But the morning had come, and the bell had rung, and her voice was quiet and level, and she was looking into the brass eyes of a creature she had raised from a cracked egg, and she was telling him to leave her, and her voice did not break. "Go," she said. He'd not move. Vor, he did not move. "Go." She stood up. She walked to the back window of the shrine, a narrow slit in the old stone that the priest had cut into the wall for the smoke to leave by. She pulled the small wooden shutter away from it. The cold morning air came in, the light came in, the smell of the north, the smell of pine and rock, and the long unbroken silence of the high peaks came in. She turned back to him. He had not moved. "You will not save me," she said. "You will live. You will live and you will grow, and you will be the thing they have all been afraid of, and you will not come back here for me. Do you understand? You will not come back. There is nothing here to come back for. There is only me, and they will take me, and after that there is nothing. Do you understand?" She did not know if he did. He came across the shrine floor to her slowly. He pressed his head into the front of her cloak, the way he had pressed his face against her glove on the first night. She put her hand on the back of his neck. She held it there. Below the hill, the second bell rang. Vor lifted his head. He looked at the window. He looked at her. He turned. He went to the window. He climbed up onto the sill. He turned once more. The brass eyes were on her, and there was a thing in them that was very old and simple, and that Iska understood, in a way she had not understood anything before in her life, was a promise. He flew. He flew badly. He flew the way a hatchling flies, with too much effort and not enough lift, and he disappeared below the line of the window almost immediately. Iska went to the window. She put her head out into the cold. He had caught the ledge below. He was running along it. He spread his wings again. He pushed off. He fell. He pushed off again. He rose. He cleared the next ridge. He kept climbing. She watched until he was a small grey mark against the iron sky to the north, and then she could not see him anymore. She stood at the window for a long time. Then she went down to the village to meet the bell. The square was already full. She knew most of the faces. She had grown up among them. The baker's wife with the broken nose, the tanner's 2 sons, the widow Estrin, who had cursed her at the well on her 10th birthday for being the daughter of a witch. They stood in the cleared centre of the square, in a wide, loose ring. The way villagers stood when something was going to happen, that they did not have the courage to refuse. Bren Holst stood at the head of the ring. His 2 soldiers. They had come back. They had come back in the night, and she had not known. Stood behind him with their cloaks pinned back, and their hands resting on the hilts of their long-crowned swords. She walked into the ring with her hood down and her hands at her sides. She had thought she would be afraid. She was not afraid. She was something else, a thing she had no name for, a thing that sat in her chest where her fear should have been, and that felt like the moment before a wave hits the shore, the long-drawn breath of the water pulling back. Iska Vey, Holst said. Captain, you have been keeping a dragon. She looked at him. She did not answer. At the hill shrine, he said. He held up the slate-grey scale between his thumb and his forefinger. I have searched the shrine this morning. I have found the brazier. I have found the bones in the bone pile. I have found the marks on the stones where the creature has been sleeping. I have not found the creature itself. The creature is gone. He let the scale fall into the snow. Where is it? I do not know. You know I do not know. You will tell me where it is. I will not. Holst looked at her for a long moment. His face did not change. The ring around his small finger turned slowly. You understand what this is, he said. I understand what this is. You understand what has always been. I understand what it has always been. He nodded. He did not look away. He was, she understood now, a careful man and a tired one. And he had wanted this morning to go differently. He had wanted her to break. He had not wanted her to walk into the ring with her hands at her sides and answer him in 3-word sentences. He had not been prepared for the daughter of the woman he had read about in the village records. He had hoped she would be smaller. She was not smaller. Bring her to the stones, he said. They took her arms, but they did not have to drag her. She walked. The path from the village square to the stone circle was a short one, 300 paces along the cleared track at the edge of the woods, past the empty sheep pens, past the long flat field where the village boys had thrown rocks at her shack every winter of her childhood. She walked this path with her head up. She did not look at the people she passed. She did not look at old Sten, who was standing in the doorway of his forge with both, his hands pressed flat against the doorframe, and his face turned away from her. She did not look at the tavern girl, who had been her one friend in the village, who was on her knees in the snow in front of the inn, with her hands pressed against her mouth. She looked only at the stones at the far end of the path, and at the iron post in the centre of them, and at the small bundle of dry kindling already stacked at its base. It was the same post. She had wondered if it would be the same post. It was. The crown did not waste good iron. They tied her to it. Holst himself did the tying. He did it with a strange care, the way a man ties a knot he has tied many times, and that he no longer takes any pleasure in. He did not look at her face. He looked at the rope. You may speak, he said. If you wish to speak, you may speak now. She thought about it. She had not prepared a speech. Her mother had not prepared a speech either. Her mother had stood at this same post on a morning like this one, and she had looked out at the village that had raised her, and she had said only one thing, which was a single word in the old language that meant remember, and then she had closed her eyes. Iska did not have the old language. She had not been taught it. There had been no one left to teach her. She looked at the village. She looked at the faces. She looked for one long moment at the iron sky to the north, where a small grey mark might or might not have been turning in a wide, slow circle above a high ridge that was too far away for anyone in the square to see. I do not forgive you, she said. She closed her eyes. The fire took hold quickly. The kindling was dry. The wind was right. She did not scream. She had known she would not scream. She had known many things that morning that she had not known the morning before. The last thing she felt was warmth. In the high peaks, 8 winters later, a man on the North Road would say afterward that he had seen a shape pass over him at dusk that he had at first taken for a low cloud. The cloud had been the wrong colour. It had been the colour of a hearth that had been kept burning for a long time. He had stopped his cart in the middle of the road and watched it move south, and when it was gone, he had crossed himself with both his hands. He was the first to see Vor. He was not the last. The dragon who came down out of the Skarn range that winter was the size of a small ship. His scales had darkened from slate to the colour of cooled iron. His wings were the wings of a creature that had been flying alone in the high air for 8 years. and that had learned what air would carry and what it would not. He came down the long valley toward Tannevik in the hour before dusk, on a clear night with no wind. He did not roar. The old stories said dragons always roared. The old stories had been wrong about other things. He landed in the square. The men who tried to fight him died. Bren Holst was one of them. He was older than he had been. On the morning he had tied Iska Vey to the post. His black hair had gone grey at the temples. And he was no longer thin in the way a careful man is thin, but in the way a sick man is thin. And he came out of the inn with his crown sword drawn, and he made it 3 steps before the fire reached him. He did not scream either. He had not screamed when his sister died in the smithy in a dale, and he did not scream now. And the ring on his small finger turned once slowly in the heat, and then it was gone. Vor did not burn the houses of the children who had been born after. He had a memory longer than any man's. He burned the tavern where the captain had sat for 41 days. He burned the long council hall, where the village elders had voted to send the bell ringer for the morning of the second bell. He burned the inn. He burned the iron post in the stone circle, which did not burn, because iron does not burn. But he held his fire on it long enough that the post melted and ran into the frozen ground and was no longer a post. Then he went up to the hill shrine. The shrine was still standing. The priest who had paid Iska her 2 coppers had died years before, and no one had taken his place. And the shrine had stood empty in the snow for 8 winters, with its door open and its brazier cold. Vor went inside. He was too large to fit through the door. He took the front wall of the shrine off with one slow motion of his shoulder, and he went inside. He lay down on the floor beside the altar where the brazier had been. He closed his eyes. The villagers who had survived watched from a long way off. They watched all that night, and all the next day, and the day after that. The dragon did not move. The villagers did not approach. By the end of the 3rd day, a kind of understanding had passed through the survivors. The way an understanding passes through people who have lived through something they will not speak of for the rest of their lives. That the dragon was not going to leave, and that the dragon was not going to kill them, and that the shrine was now a thing that belonged to the dragon and not to them, and that as long as they did not climb the hill, the dragon would let them keep their houses. They did not climb the hill. Tannevik was rebuilt, what could be rebuilt, over the years that followed. The new houses were smaller. The new tavern did not have a corner table. The children who were born after the burning grew up knowing not to walk the goat path, and not to ask their parents why, and not to look toward the hill shrine when the wind came down out of the north and carried with it. Sometimes, in certain winters, a sound like a kettle just beginning to whistle. Up on the hill, the dragon who was called Vor, though no one in the village ever spoke that name aloud, and most had forgotten it had ever been a name, lay in the broken shrine with his head on the floor beside the cold brazier, and the brass eyes that were still the colour of melted brass were closed. And they would remain closed for a long time. He was waiting. He did not know for what. The hand that had fed him was gone. The voice that had named him was gone. The world had taken from him the only thing in it he had ever loved, and he had taken from the world the thing it had used to take her, and now there was nothing left to do but wait. And so he was waiting. The snow fell on him through the open roof of the shrine. It melted before it touched his scales. Some bonds are not broken by death. They are only finished by it. If Iska's quiet stayed with you, the way she walked to the post with her head up, the way Vor still waits in a shrine that no one will climb, sit with that before you move on. Tell me what you would have done in her place. Not what you would have said, what you would have done. That is the only answer that ever mattered, and it is the one she gave. Don't forget to click on the like and share button, and turn on your notification bell. See you in the next video.